Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. The topic of our presentation this morning is the curious case of device form factor. The brief audio that you heard at the onset of the presentation, if those of you are not familiar with the movie, is from The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which hence is kind of the storyline that we're going through with reverse aging, all right? So we, looking at the topic of reverse aging, what we're going to talk about in this presentation is the differences in behavior across PC and mobile devices, right? So if we look back in 1980, when I was a little kid, 5 years old, I had this behemoth of a machine in front of me. And then when we go all the way up to 2013, I feel like I've gained 4 to 5 inches on my waistline and my computer's on a diet, all right? It's kind of interesting in terms of understanding what has been the progression of these computing machines throughout the decades. We've gone from very bulky, cluttered machines to very sleek, lean devices, iWatches, iPhones, different types of devices that have been brought into the play for the research space moving forward. Now, when we look at the form factor funnel, we have seen 40 years of evolution throughout form factors. Whereas we had 35 unique form factors 40 years ago, in the last decade we had 12, and today the average person has 3 form factors. Of those 3 form factors, what we have focused on are 2 form factors, being mobile and PC, because that's where 90% of the web traffic comes in from. Now, what happens online in 60 seconds? This is the average amount of activity online across the board on an average day. We're talking millions of different types of applications that are utilized. Whether it's emails, whether it's Facebook, whether it's YouTube, you really have a variety of different apps and things that are utilized on the internet across the board. Now, what happens on average when a person, on a person's device on a day? In average, the average person spends about 160 minutes on their device per day. So when you look at all the different types of applications they utilize, downloading music, IMing, playing games, shopping, it actually shows that it's quite a bit. Now, I have a question for all of you. What would you say is the most expensive piece of real estate in the world? The mind of the consumer, right? Now, in order for us to be able to understand how to gain that component of that mind of consumer, we as market researchers are constantly challenged by the number of applications, by the number of activities that are always trying to gain that market share of attention of the consumer. So we, as researchers, have come up with that understanding to say, oh, I'm sorry, I went ahead of myself. We, as researchers, have decided to look at mobile and PC in our study, and with this, the findings that are going to come forward. So now I'm going to hand it over to Prashant, and he will talk a little bit about our findings.
Great, thanks Jason. Hello everyone. Coming to the objective of this research, we are trying to basically uncover the finer differences in terms of how people use these 2 different form factors, which is PC and mobile, and basically layer the behavioral aspects over a quantitative study and look at how this behavioral intelligence can actually produce better results and create better studies for us. Coming to the behavioral aspect of it, we try to look at several different aspects. More at a macro level, we look at how people use these devices, when they use them, for how long they use them. And coming to the more category-specific granular differences, we look at how they use their social media, how they consume media, how they send emails, and a whole lot of other minor stuff. So ultimately, the idea is to see how this behavioral intelligence can affect how we design studies, how we basically analyze the data, and how we adjust for any bias if there is any. The research methodology, we have two unique sets of data. One is coming in from the behavioral part of it, from the on-device meters that are running on PC and mobile. Then this is basically a 1 month data, past month. And then we have a small 15-minute quantitative study that we designed, which basically asks questions about the lifestyle habits, shopping preferences, and web usage aspects. So overall, combining these two data sets, we're also looking at the metadata that gets generated when people are clicking on surveys, how long they're engaged on different questions, when they are dropping out, and a whole lot of data set. So we're looking at Mexico and India for this research, because we want to also look at any regional biases that might come up. So these are the two markets. So coming to the findings, we're going to show you a very macro level view of how these devices differ, and then we'll get into more category level differences. So there are not just differences, but very interesting similarities also. So at a very high level, this shows you when people are active when it comes to surveys on these two devices. So the heat map is basically an hourly plot across the weekdays and the weekends. And you have the most activity at the red part, and then the blue being the least active time slot. So we have used like data from thousands of respondents who have clicked on surveys, email surveys, mobile surveys, and plotted this. So what you can see is clearly there is a concentrated area on PC, especially during the middle of the week and in the morning hours where people are most active, right? And when it comes to mobile, the shift happens, it is more towards the end of the day, but it is not just concentrated at one place, but spread out here and there towards the end of the day. So very interesting findings. We, in fact, use these findings in deploying our surveys, in actually targeting people on these devices at the right time during using right device. Looking at the regional differences between Mexico and India, they're not very different. You can see that PC, it's almost the same. And when it comes to mobile, there is a slight gap, but it occurs in the same time period during the day, right? We have seen this regional convergence not just on this overall behavior, but on a lot of other aspects. So going forward, we are only reporting combined findings and not regional findings. So summarizing it, people take email surveys when they reach work and mobile surveys when they're leaving work or after work. A very interesting slide, which basically condenses that heat map even further and just tries to categorize by the hour what kind of activity happens on the device, right? If you see the magnitude of usage, it is not very different in between these devices, right? The PC is pretty constant during the workday and not varying so much, and then it tapers down a bit towards the end of the day. But if you see the mobile usage, it constantly climbs up, and it is the highest before people go to bed, right? And the top four usage activities, the email, instant messaging, social media, and shopping, you can see they're spread out, but clearly email is all over, right? You can see it being used across the hours. Then clearly mobile is being utilized more for instant messaging. And then one clear coincidence here or commonality is the shopping when it occurs during the afternoon times and towards the evening. Getting into more granular picture, these are the most interesting findings in the presentation, I would say. These are basically topic level, like how is social media used, how are people looking at in terms of sentiments on online transactions, and a whole lot of topics. The first thing is social media behavior. This has come out to be one of the very interesting findings, which even we couldn't kind of anticipate, was social media usage is concentrated on a PC on specific intervals of time for a longer duration, Although there is bits and pieces of usage on the other hours, we kind of suppress that just to highlight these 3 time slots. What you can see is the duration of usage is pretty high on these specific time slots, whereas on the mobile, it is more scattered, more frequent, but for lesser duration, right? Just superimposing these two, you can basically, when you plan social media studies, we all talk about launching survey invites on social media, engaging people where they are already engaged, right? So you can use these findings to basically understand how to create shorter, sweeter surveys on mobile, and then, of course, longer, engaging, a lot of time-demanding surveys on PC. So with that, I hand over to Alan to take us through the other important findings.
All right, thanks, Prasanth. Hi, everyone. I'm going to take you through some actual search behavior first. So here we go. All right, so the question is, do searches differ as a function of mobile phone versus PC? And a quick look at the slide indicates the answer is yes. So looking at the mobile phone slide, or half of the slide first, you can see that the searches that people do on their phones tend to be very in the moment. So things like locations, how do I get to where I'm trying to go? Contacts, what's that person's phone number again? Sports, what's the score of the game? So the searches done on mobile phones tend to be characterized by being, again, very timely, very in the moment. PC, on the other hand, are also timely, of course, but maybe less urgent. I'd characterize them as like learning and current events might be a way to characterize it. So the top 3 searches there are people, weather, and news. So clearly some differences. Now, as market researchers, we can see that there's some content differences in what is searched for as a function of whether it's phone or PC, and we should be able to leverage that information to our advantage. For example, gaming is more likely to be searched on a mobile phone. We at Microsoft do a ton of research on gaming because of Xbox, so it would make sense to target people with surveys, on their mobile phones. Okay. Next, we're going to look at the purpose of why people access the web. And let's just go right, there we go. And what you're going to see here is there's certain similarities and certain differences between the reason people access the internet on their phones versus on the PCs. Shopping and email common to both, no shock there. Others in the top 5 for each tend to align themselves nicely with what we saw on the previous slide. So for your phones, it's instant messaging, going on social media, playing games, whereas on your PC, it's more things like learning, streaming videos, and financial transactions. So some important similarities, some important differences. We're going to shift gears now quickly here and go into the quant study part of the presentation. So what you've seen to this point has all been actual behavior. So now we're going to look at stated behavior, see what that is all about, and then see how it differs from what we observed. The first thing that we looked at was response patterns. You may recall a few minutes ago, Prasanth showed you the heat map that showed that people are online at different times as a function of whether they're on their phone or on their PC. We tried to leverage that information as well as demographic preferences and channel preferences, and we asked ourselves, if we leverage that information when we recruit respondents, will it affect our response rates? Happily, the answer is a resounding yes. If you look at the slide, you can see substantial increases for both for response rates, which is what the numbers are, for both PC and phone, 63% for one, 40% for the other. So targeting people when they're online, where they want to be targeted, seems to be a great thing to do. Okay, we can also look at claimed versus actual behavior here, and as this goes up, you can see the gray bars are the actual usage. The red bars are claimed usage. So you can see a couple of things here. First off, there's a consistent pattern of overstatement. It seems to be higher slightly for PC than for phone, but it's pretty significant. In fact, across the different tasks we looked at, there's a gap between, or people overstate the extent of time to which they're online by a factor of 2. So as researchers now, having that information about the relationship between stated and observed behavior allows us to sort of adjust the stated data that we have and make it more in line with reality. Okay, with that, I turn it back to Prasanth.
Thanks, Alan. Let's look at some sentiments around online transactions, spending money online. So although we collected a lot of attitudes around transacting online, using these devices, these three negatively oriented statements come up with some unique traits. So this is about, I wouldn't buy expensive items online, I don't trust mobile apps for buying online, and basically a negative side of the whole transaction. So if you see the highest income groups and the lowest income groups, they currently, they basically feature in, they tend to agree more with these negative statements. But the actual behavior shows that even though the high income groups are saying they're not very comfortable doing these transactions, they are the people who are actually buying the most, right? But the lowest income group is they stick to their attitude, they're not, the behavior is not very different. And also, interestingly, the age group of 18 to 24, they browse a lot of products, they do a lot of activity when it comes to looking up e-commerce websites, but they buy less. And we also asked people to rate the difficulty or ease of buying some of these categories of products. And interestingly, it's consistent. You know, both PC and mobile users say tickets and gifts are the easiest to buy, whereas jewelry, financial products, and home furnishings are tough to buy. We also asked people to rate PC versus mobile again in terms of the experience of the study. The survey taking experience, so I would like to draw your attention to the fact that we kind of very carefully crafted this survey, optimized it for both the devices, and ensured that the length of interview is the same on both the platforms, right? And then, surprisingly, they come out similar in terms of the overall experience. But there are two specific areas, the ease of selecting answers and then the navigation. You know, mobile clearly wins there. We attribute this outcome to mostly the touch enablement of this device, you know, where you can just, if the content is rightly placed on your screen, you just tap, 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 and then end the survey, right? So that's again an interesting finding. And coming to the numbers that we have seen more on the field metrics, you can see mobile has a slightly more response rate, but the dropout rate is also higher. So the PC still has better completion rates, but our message is if you really create a tailor-made survey for mobile, you can see much better conversions, much better completion rates. With that, I hand it over back to Alan to talk about what clients think about these findings and how we can utilize these findings in our day-to-day research planning.
Thank you, Prasanth. All right, let's bring this to a close here. All right, just to give you a brief client perspective, just from my biased perspective working at Microsoft, for us still, and I imagine for a lot of people in the room, PC is still king, at least for now. We did an audit last year of the studies done by our market research team and found that 94% of our respondents are still taking surveys on their PCs. Kind of a surprise to me and not probably representative, but that's what we saw. So PC's not going away anytime soon. Clearly, though, mobile is important. It's only going to get more important over time. I mean, everything we've seen over the past 2 days supports that. So I won't belabor that point. Third, hopefully we've seen here and already realized that whenever you can combine behavioral and attitudinal data, it's a great idea to do so. Again, Microsoft is absurdly lucky with all the data that we have. I mean, we have Bing search, we have Office telemetry data, we have Xbox data. Soon we're going to have LinkedIn data. We've only scratched the surface of all the cool things we can do with that. So I'm really excited by the stuff that I've learned the past 2 days and eager to dig into this more. Okay, how are the learnings important? Hopefully all this will be reviewed, so I'll go through it quickly. But survey design, we know that people overestimate the time they spend online, so make short surveys, right? People feel like they're on for a long time, so cut out extraneous questions whenever you can. Also make the surveys engaging, you know, explore gamification if you can. And third, make sure you're designing the right questions for the right device. You know, don't have big horizontal grids for a mobile survey. Okay, second, fielding and sampling. We've shown that different demographic groups are active online at different times. If you leverage that information, if you target the right people at the right time on the right device, you'll get better response rates. Okay, and third, analysis and reporting. We've talked about this. We know that people overstate the amount of time they're online. Having that information will allow us to calibrate stated behavior to make it more in line with reality. Okay, a lot of animation on this slide. But just closing here, and circling back to the Curious Case of Benjamin Button theme, my guess is that nobody actually got younger during this presentation, but I will say that we've clearly moved from an era where we've gone from a bunch of big, clunky devices down to today where 90% of activity online is being done on two increasingly small, increasingly sleek devices, the PC and the mobile phone. What we've tried to do today is to dig into how people use these devices, and I hope we've shown two things. One is that there are differences between how people use the PC and the phone, and two, if we leverage those differences, we can see all sorts of benefits. So increased response rate, increased engagement, lower cost, improved reach, and most importantly, we'll get the highest data quality possible to support business decisions. And at the end of the day, that's really what this is all about. Thank you.
Nice touch. Okay, so do we have some questions for these three gentlemen? Sarah, just 1 second.
Yeah.
First of all, thanks for doing something custom for this. We really appreciate the effort. It wasn't just a pitch on Microsoft. That was great, so thank you. Given the geographies, India and Mexico, how, if you had to guess, how similar or different would the, say US, Western Europe be relative to that? Because PC is still king in those markets. We've done mobile video surveys in both Mexico and India. India has been really hard, for example, because of the network.
I'll answer part of it to start. I mean, when I was saying PC was still king, that 94% was sort of all of the research that we've done on our team. It wasn't specifically referring to those markets. But clearly, I think well, all right, to directly answer your question, I think had we done the study in the US, for example, I think we would have seen different patterns. I think we would have seen people using the different devices at slightly different times of day, but I don't think the patterns would have been radically different at all. I don't know what you guys think.
There might be some regional differences, but what we try to kind of showcase here is to use that methodology rather than the findings themselves, because at least we have seen the emerging markets to behave similarly when compared to the developed markets. So overall, there might be differences at a regional level, but we would say, if adequate findings are there in terms of both the regions, you'll be able to leverage them to achieve these results.
And just to add to that, I think that understanding the cultural nuances within these markets, right, understanding socioeconomic, political, religious influencers are really the key when you're looking at a Mexico and an India versus the US market, having that understanding and be able to build your story moving forward. Yes?
Yeah, in your heat map, if I'm remembering correctly, it looked like there were some interesting differences between the weekday and the weekend. And yet later, when you showed the concentration of PC at particular times of day versus the mobile kind of interspersed social media concentrations, it collapsed over day to week. And so I was just wondering, if you showed your response rate data, how's the weekend, weekday play into that? What might give a better boost for the weekend?
Sure. Our observation has been that in these markets, especially the emerging market space, weekdays are better for research, whereas weekends, they don't look that great in terms of the response rates we see. That said, not just the weekday versus weekend, like Jason said, the cultural differences. For example, we were conducting this research actually in Indonesia for some other conference. We've seen that Ramadan has affected and toppled the numbers over, right? There was absolutely, there was a lot of chaos in the data because of these cultural nuances. People are not participating in surveys during Ramadan. A lot of these affect how people respond to surveys. So simple answer is weekdays are better weekends are slightly lower in terms of activity when it comes to purely quantitative studies.
And I would just add, A, thanks for the question, Mike. It was a good question. And B, we've only like literally scratched the surface of all the stuff, the cool stuff in this data. I mean, if you guys have questions, hit us up with them. We'd be happy to try and answer them because there's a lot more to this data than we've been able to present today in 20 minutes. So hit us up with questions. We'd be happy to try and answer them.
All right, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.